Hi, my name is Spencer. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified emotionally focused couples therapist. And I'm also trained in EMDR. I'm really excited to be joining you today for this Max group and really excited to be sharing some of the content that I'm going to be reviewing. The title of what I'm going to be sharing is Clean Up Your Expectations, a roadmap for getting clear on expectations. Before we get into things, I have my little disclaimer here that I need to read. This is not therapy, and as a group of people coping with a variety of presenting problems, information discussed and shared in this group is intended to support the therapeutic process and increase readiness for change. If you are feeling suicidal or are having life-threatening thoughts, this group is not the place to discuss those things. Please consider calling 988, getting in touch with your therapist as soon as possible, or reaching out to a loved one to help you access additional resources. We are recording this and it will be available on our YouTube channel for you to rewatch. Due to this, if you are not comfortable turning your camera on, that's okay. If you would like to change your name on your Zoom profile, that can be done as well. With all that being said, groups are most powerful when we learn from each other and share our experiences with one another. So again, like I said, the title of what I'm going to be sharing with you today is Clean Up Your Expectations, a roadmap for getting clear on expectations. To get started, let me share with you a brief story that illustrates in my mind kind of what expectations can do for us in our relationships. I'm going to be specifically focusing on your romantic relationships, but please understand that this in many ways can apply to other relationships that you have in your life, such as, but not limited to, relationships with family, friends, and coworkers. So here's my story. I'll set the scene for you. Imagine with me that it's Thanksgiving Day. Okay, got the family gathered around, and imagine that the following conversation happens. Okay, so there's dad eating the green jello with carrots in it. And if you are listening to this outside of Utah or you're not familiar with Utah culture, yes, that is a real thing. Don't ask me why or how, but it is a real thing. Green jello with carrots in there. And who knows if the carrots are actually ever cooked or if they're raw when you put them in there. But needless to say, dad is eating green jello with carrots. One of the kids says to dad, "Dad, I can't believe you really like that stuff." That's my best impersonation of a teenager. To which the dad replies, "I don't," as he puts another mouthful into his mouth. Mom happens to walk in at this time and hears it and says, "I've been making that green jello with carrots for years. I only make that jello because I thought you liked it." And that's the scenario, okay? So this is an example of how an expectation, in this case, the expectation that dad had that mom would make this green jello with carrots and that he needed to eat it, and the expectation or assumption that mom had that he actually liked it because he was eating it. And it can cause things like this, right? Years of making an awful, awful jello thing for years can happen, right? Not to mention the feelings of resentment and other negative stuff that may have come from that type of experience, okay? So let's cover here at the beginning, what are expectations? Well, Google defines expectations in this way. Expectations is a noun, okay, or it's a noun, and it's a strong belief that something will happen or will be the case in the future. So expectations are future oriented, right? And as a therapist, one thing that I would add is that belief, right? And Google says a strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. That belief is based off of past experiences and it shapes how I act, right? So it's not just a belief that that's where it ends. This stuff is totally going to influence how I act and how I show up, both within my life in general and specifically within my relationships. Okay. So that's the key thing that I want you to keep in mind. Expectations aren't just a belief system that you have that does nothing. It is going to influence how you act and how you behave, whether you care to admit it or not, and whether you acknowledge it's there. Again, part of why I'm like presenting on this is like in the spirit of spring cleaning, right? It's spring right now. And so that's kind of why I felt inspired to share this. Well, whether you care to acknowledge the crap in your garage or in your shed or whatever, the fact is it still takes up space and it still influences you in some way or another, right? Whether you care to admit it and whether you care to do anything about it or not. What I'm inviting you to do through this Max group is to do something about the expectations that you already have. Because again, they're going to influence things. I just want to give you a little bit more power over what those things do to you day to day. So we have expectations about all sorts of things. These can be around, but not limited to, cleaning, sex, weekend plans, parenting, how we navigate things like religion or spirituality, politics, or just differing belief systems, right? Expectations are going to influence all those types of things, right? Again, they influence how we act. And so any action that you have or reaction that you have is probably ultimately based off of an expectation or an assumption, right? Like I said earlier, they're usually based off of lived experience, right? I can't really think of a single expectation or assumption that I've had in my life or that I currently have that doesn't have a root in some type of experience that I've lived, right? Now, sometimes, and to throw this out as almost like a caveat, that's like belief or that expectation may be because of things we've seen and not directly experienced, right? Like, for example, if I've seen other people do certain things, I might have an expectation or an assumption that everyone is going to do those things or act in that way and behave accordingly with those types of people, even though that's probably not true or representative of all people within that group, right? In fact, this is where a lot of prejudices and racism can come from because of assumptions or expectations that maybe have been lived, may have been passed down from generation to generation, or may have been things you've heard, but again, are probably not actually true, and at least not for everyone, right? And why it's important to identify that assumptions and expectations come from actual lived experience is because it makes it a little bit easier to like understand why we have them. That these expectations are not necessarily super intentional or really like purposeful in the sense of when people have expectations and the actions that come from that, it's not like they're trying to purposefully hurt us or take advantage of us. Now, of course, if that's your felt experience, please talk to someone about that. Talk to them about that. Set boundaries. Learn how to work through those things together. But again, generally speaking, it's not intentional that someone is trying to hurt you just because of how their expectations come out, right? So we can be empathetic, we can be understanding to where a person is coming from with their expectations because of that process, okay? Then it's their job to unpack those things and try to change them in meaningful ways so their expectations aren't ruining things in your life, in their life, etc. Right? So now let's get into an activity that I want to invite all of you to do. Now, again, this is geared towards romantic relationships. And if your spouse is not here presently, hopefully you can rewatch this or you can pause this video and you can talk together, right? Again, whether that's your spouse, partner, or whoever you're living with or whatever, right? If you're not currently in a romantic relationship, do this for yourself, just regarding general expectations you have for the people around you. Maybe picking a setting like work, church, a political setting, or whatever, and seeing if you can identify what my expectations are in those settings and kind of unpacking a little bit about where they come from. Again, we're doing some spring cleaning here. Let's clean out these expectations. So I'm going to share my screen right now and share with you all something that I use with couples in therapy to help understand expectations, where they come from, and how to get on the same page. So let me share my screen real quick here. Okay. So here you have a list of expectations that are, again, specific to couples versus reality, okay? So let me just kind of orient you to this document real quick. So on the left-hand side here, we've got all of these tasks, right? Specific things that you might do in a relationship. And a lot of these are pretty logistical based, but not always, right? Like initiating talks about the relationship, for example, is more emotion based, obviously. Then there's two columns, one for mom, one for dad, and then one for you and one for your partner. Now, the way that I like to work with this is to first start with what you saw in your home growing up, specifically with mom and dad. So, for example, when it came to staying home with children, is that something that you typically saw mom do or dad do or both of them? So you might put like an X here, right, for each of these or whichever one it was. Excuse me. And you just go down the list doing that with every single expectation here. And then if you can think of other things, adding them in kind of a blank space, right? Um, again, selecting which one you saw or who you saw doing what. Was it one of them or was it both of them? Then going through and marking down what you currently see happening in the relationship that you have now, right? So currently in the relationship, when it comes to staying home with children, if applicable, is that you doing that or your partner doing that, or is it both of you? When it comes to making the bed, is it one of you or both of you? Okay, of what is actually happening. And then if you can, thinking about it and maybe even using a different color, if you were to like kind of take a screenshot of this and print this out or whatever. Um, Using a different color, mark out what is the expectation that I have, right? So for example, when it comes to maintaining ties with relatives, you might select that, man, it's mostly me that's doing that. And my partner is not doing that. And I want both of us to be engaged in doing that thing together. I don't want it to be all me, right? Or maybe you might look at auto maintenance and you might be like, oh, my partner does all of that, but I really wish it was different. I really wish it was just me who handled the car maintenance because that makes more sense for our relationship and where we're at right now. Okay. So again, you're just going through this together to be able to outline what did I see growing up versus what's happening now, and what is the expectation of what I wish it was or wish it did look like instead. I think it's super fascinating when a couple can both do this and they can kind of compare things, right? Especially to notice that how typically what we saw in our home from our parents is what we saw or what we experience now in our relationship, right? Now, if you grew up with, a gay parents or lesbian parents, or something else, like please just replace mom or dad, whatever relevancy there is for you in your relationship. Um, but like, for example, if, making major decisions in your home growing up, it was like mom did all that and dad didn't do any of that. And you're noticing that pattern in your relationship right now where it's like, um, you know, the the other person is doing that and but you don't have any power in that or something like that. That I think can be really telling because oftentimes we repeat these patterns of what we've seen growing up for whatever reason, right? And I just want you to have more awareness to what these certain things are. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here in a second, but before I do, again, I just want to invite you to um, pause this video or remember to come back to this later or take a screenshot real quick so that you can like review this together. So I'll give you just a second to do that before I stop sharing my screen. Okay, so coming back then to like how this works, right? Or why this is even important. It's so important because as you reflect on your expectations, you as a couple or you in your individual life and whatever relationships you're reflecting on can start to do something about the expectations so they're not just dictating how you react or how you act in certain moments, right? And so what I want to directly invite you to do is to, after you've kind of gone through those expectations, would be to reflect on, okay, which one of these do I feel like I either A, need to change or B, really could change right now in terms of what's actually happening? Because if you can get on the same page or, be more realistic with what your expectations need to be, what you'll find is that you'll have less moments of butting heads with your spouse or partner. Because oftentimes fights or disagreements are based off of incorrect expectations or assumptions, or unrealistic expectations or assumptions about yourself or about the other person. And so, again, if we can kind of like clean those things up, it makes it easier for us to show up in our relationship without those expectations or assumptions bogging us down or negatively influencing our reactions. So, I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope you at least learned something new for you, for your relationship, and that you can take this into spring and summer and the rest of this year to make your relationship that much better by cleaning up your expectations. Again, my name is Spencer. It's been so nice to chat with you all today. Until next time.